Is it ready? Okay, we're ready, Warren.
Okay, the public hearing scheduled for 2 o'clock is called to order. Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Here.
Dr. Estra,
Here.
Mr. O'Neill,
Here.
Mr. Rue,
Here.
Mr. Copeland.
we're ready, Warren.
Here. Okay, the public hearing scheduled for 2 o'clock is called to order. Clerk will call the roll.
Just one moment. We have
Somebody needs
some.
to turn on the computer.
Yes.
Okay. Is that okay now, Regina? All right. Sorry about that. Let me read this letter here. Notice of a public hearing was to consider the budget for the calendar year 2021 was published in the Springfield News and Sun, a newspaper of general circulation within the city, on November 27th, 2020. Attached here too is a true and correct copy of such legal notice.
Estrop, I move that the communication be ordered, received, recorded in the minutes, and filed.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Dr. Estrop,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes. Finance report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. What we have before you today is a PowerPoint that I will be working through that takes a high-level overview of the 2021 budget. As you recall, it's moved on awfully quickly, but in mid-November, we sat together and we presented a budget to you. And again, this is a high-level overview of that budget. We flip to the next slide, please. Thank you. For 2021, we are projecting, it was a difficult year to project because of all the things that we've been through and discussed many times, but we're projecting general fund revenues to be about 48 million for the 2021 budget. Based on our revenue in the taxes, as well as many other funds, we're going to see a slight slip in revenue compared to our revised 2020 budget. It will be down about 1.9%. If I had to attribute it to one major factor, that it's going to be the difference between our CARES reimbursements for 2020 and the CARES reimbursements that we will book in 2021. That accounts for most of the difference, although we do have some weakness in some of our other line items. For example, in 2021, our income tax receipts are projected to remain flat compared to the 2020 revised budget. We expect to collect almost $40 million in income tax receipts for the next year. And 90%, just as a reminder, 90% of that goes to the general fund and 10% goes to the permanent improvement fund. Next slide, please. This is a graphic representation of how our general fund revenues are derived. 75% of it is from income tax. So you see why that's such an important part of our lifeblood. That number has been as high as 80%. Based on what I just talked about in the form of our CARES reimbursements are a little bit higher this year. And so our other items crept up a little bit and pushed that percentage of income tax down. Local government fund and state shared taxes account for about 3% of the revenue in the general fund. What that equates to is about a little over $1.5 million in local government fund and $88,000 in state shared taxes, and that's basically liquor tax and cigarette tax. Fines and forfeitures are 3%, just a little over $1.4 million. Services and charges are $1,651,000, and then all others, which I mentioned, are our reimbursements, hotel motel tax, and some other miscellaneous revenues account for about 15% of what the general fund expects to receive in 2021.
Mark,
next slide. Yes.
If you could go back to the pie chart. I know we've talked about this on several occasions, but that local government fund and state shared taxes, which is now 3% projected for 2021. As I recall, that was as high as 6% or higher at one point.
It was probably higher. I look at it in dollar terms most of the time, and it was kind of the high water mark, as I recall, is about $5.5 million.
Okay.
So we've lost a significant amount of that revenue over the years based on changes at the state.
And very frankly, those changes at the state is what largely drove us to have to go to the voters, and thank heavens they saw the need, but that hasn't changed, has it?
No, it has not. And I don't foresee the local government fund coming back at any point in the future. Those changes are permanent. As there has been discussion of it, but I don't think that's gone anywhere. And as far as I can see, I don't see a return to those, we'll call them the good old days.
Thank you.
The next chart is a bar chart, which just shows graphically the increase in our revenues over the last 10 years. From 2010, general fund revenues were just a little over 37 million, and they've grown both through organic growth in our community, as well as the generous 0.4% that the citizens voted for in 2017. So we've grown to what is projected to be 47.9 million in 2021. Next slide, please. On the expenditure side in general fund, we are budgeting to spend just a little over $51 million. This assumes full staffing levels, and as you may recall, we had 27 pay dates in 2020. That happens every 11 years. So we're back to our normal 26 pay dates for staff. But one of the conservative items that we build into the budget is assuming full staffing levels throughout the year. We all know that does not happen. There are vacancies that occur all the time, and it takes a little bit of time to fill those vacancies. And so this is a way that we build in a little bit of wiggle room into the budget and make sure that we cover ourselves. We are projecting, however, an operational deficit for 2021 of $3.1 million. And most of that is due to transfers to the Permanent Improvement Fund for capital needs and for paving projects throughout our community. I think that accounts for $3 million of that deficit, $2 million of transfer for the road program, and an additional $1 million being transferred to PI for equipment needs, for keeping up with city assets, that sort of thing. So I see that as investing in our community. Even with the deficit, the general fund balance is estimated to be $10.7 million at the end of 2021. That would be just a little over 21% of our expenditures. And that's consistent with our commitment to rebuild the city's financial reserves so we can weather financial storms that happen. Next slide. This is a graphic representation of where we spend our money. As you can see, the gray piece is public safety and accounts for 55% of our spending. Municipal court, that is 10%. So kind of in that public safety municipal court area, we're spending about 65% of our money. Neighborhood services, which include engineering, code enforcement, inspections, community development, we spend about 11% of our resources there in the general fund. NTP and NTPRD and SCAT account for 2%, and all other, which are mostly administrative functions like finance, city manager's office, IT, legal, facilities, that accounts for 22% of our spending. Kind of the highlights of the operations and staffing related to that spending is police staffing is budgeted at 130 sworn officers and funds the Safe Streets Task Force. Fire staffing is budgeted at 127 firefighters/paramedics, and overall staffing is at almost 564 FTEs for 2021. In 2020, we budgeted for 584.7 FTEs, and that drop is due mainly to the combined dispatch and those employees moving over to the county. Permanent Improvement Fund, which is really where we invest both in our community and ourselves to keep up the assets that the taxpayers have paid for. We are budgeting revenue in that fund of $7.5 million for 2021. $3 million of that will go to a neighborhood streets paving program. Some other highlights of investing in assets and equipment include fire ladder truck, 8 police cruisers, police staff vehicle, police in-car cameras, and 2 dump trucks with snow plows, which will be important as we get into the snow season. NTPRD is also budgeted for $200,000 of capital improvements in the city's parks. And some other noteworthy projects include the airport repairs and upgrades, as we are seeing more businesses interested in locating out at the airport. And in addition to that, we are attempting to maintain our city facilities. That's a never-ending task, as you can imagine, with as many buildings as the city owns. Also, when we were back in November, we talked about our utility funds, and the utility funds cover water, sewer, and stormwater. And over the course of the last 5 years, we have committed more than $80 million to keeping that infrastructure and improving that infrastructure in our community. Some of those projects include some things that people don't normally see but are important. A high rate treatment facility out at the wastewater treatment plant that prevents us from having overflows and allows us to handle more sewage. The Erie Express sewer, which runs on the northwest side of the city, is complete. We continue to do neighborhood upgrades. We've talked about it several times, but when we redo our neighborhood streets, many times we want to do the water and sewer upgrades so that we don't have to ever go back and cut into a brand new street for a water main break, for example. And then continuing to support and expand our water service. The Eastern Pressure District project is underway right now. This budget also assumes no rate increases are recommended at this time. As we've talked about, our citizens were generous enough to give us additional tax revenues to help in many areas of the city, but we believe that that's important. That important initiative is paramount, that we keep our commitments and our promises we made. And so we are continuing to devote at least $2 million in annual neighborhood streets program. We've added police officers for the Safe Streets Task Force. We've reopened the police substation on Johnny Lytle and the fire station number 5 in 2017. We've done our best to increase our reserves to stabilize our finances, and we continue to invest in equipment and city assets to be able to serve the public.
If you could go back, please. Brian, I'm wondering if at some future meeting, I know you could bring a summary of how many streets we've paved, some information on the effect of the additional police officers and the Safe Streets Task Force. I think it would be, and Mark, if you could bring us some information about how our reserves have grown, I think that would be useful information for us to review and for the people to know, because they make good investments. As we've talked, we've had good results in all of those areas, and I think it might be useful if we could bring that information forward publicly at either a work session or a meeting.
Yes, Commissioner, we certainly can provide that information, and I would suggest doing a work session would probably be the best avenue for sharing that information.
Great, sounds good, thank you.
Our next slide will just touch on what you mentioned there, Commissioner. This is our snapshot of our neighborhood streets paving program. It shows some of the streets that we've already done, what we're planning for 21 and 22. And so you can see that we're trying our best to get around the city and engage all the neighborhoods and continue. It's a large task, but we're continuing to make some very good headway as far as neighborhood streets paving goes.
That's a great graphic. That's exactly what I was talking about. If we could look at the number of dollars total invested in this, or looking ahead in terms of investments we will make, I think that would be useful.
Be happy to bring that information to the commission. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions that you have at this point in time.
Any questions? Okay. Do we have an audience? Jill?
Staff, we do not have any public other than through the YouTube channel.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Clerk will call the roll.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes. The commission meeting for today is called to order. The roll call from the hearing will cover this also. Please rise for the invocation and pledge of allegiance. Our God, we're grateful for the opportunity to meet and to make decisions for the people of Springfield. Help us to make good ones that serve everyone's best interest and moves our community forward. In your name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting?
So moved.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes. The clerk will proceed with first readings by title only.
Confirming and approving a development incentive agreement, non-residential development with Golden Sites Limited to provide for water and sewer services to real property outside the city limits. Authorizing the city manager to enter into a development incentive agreement, single-family residential development with James H. Britton and Karen S. Britton to provide for water services to real property outside the city limits. Authorizing the city manager to enter into agreements with Reed Park Limited for the lease, operation, and maintenance of Reed Park Golf Course. Authorizing the city manager to enter into agreement with the National Trail Parks and Recreation District for an amount not to exceed $300,000 for the maintenance of certain real estate owned by the city. Extending support from the City Commission of the City of Springfield, Ohio, to a tax credit development proposed by Neighborhood Housing Partnership of Greater Springfield Incorporated. Extending support from the City Commission of the City of Springfield, Ohio, to a tax credit development proposed by Interfaith Housing Network and RLH Partners for permanent supportive housing.
Any questions or comments from commissioners?
Yes.
Miss-
Go ahead, Rob.
Just if you could share a little bit more about 22820.
Yes, Commissioner. So this is a new agreement for the operation of the Reed Park Golf Course out on the northeast side of town. If you recall, we entered into an agreement 3 years ago with Reed Park Limited to operate and maintain the course out there. On top of that, both sharing in the liquor services, so they manage the restaurant and so forth as well. And so this agreement creates a 1-year agreement with 2 renewal options of 1 year each. It sets up the manner at which the Reed Park Limited will pay or put money aside for the taxes. If you recall the original agreement, the first 2 years we had a stake or a participation in the overall tax of the property. That has gone away and falls completely now on Reed Park Limited. What this does do, though, is it makes funds available up to $36,000 a year for capital improvements on things at which we would need to be, if we continue to operate and maintain the property ourselves, would need to be maintained to the buildings and so forth. And so this provides up to $36,000 a year for the 3 years for those capital type improvements. In talking with them, much like other communities and golf courses across the state and country, COVID has actually helped a little bit for that specific activity, that sport. More people played this year. They would see those numbers of rounds maybe tapering off into 2021, depending on the pandemic, and as people maybe play less next year in 2021. But it's kind of a they're kind of being flexible in the number of rounds they may see in 2021, considering 2020 was kind of an anomaly as it relates to the sport of golf, but hopefully helps an overall long-term rebound of golf in general by more people getting exposed and interested to golf itself.
So to sum up, we're providing less support than we did under the old agreement.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I believe that's fair to say, because the tax bill was a significant cost that will now be borne solely by Reed Park Limited.
Thanks for clarity.
And I have a question on 2030-20 and 2031-20. Could our staff talk about the housing that's being proposed here? I know it's just supporting neighborhood housing partnership and interfaith.
Yes, these are both tax credit projects, and I will have Shannon, who's been working with the developer and their presentation to CGAB, our Community Grants Advisory Board, speak to the NHP project and then the IHN one.
Absolutely. So the project proposed by Neighborhood Housing Partnerships 230-20 is the exact same project that's come before this commission twice before. So this will be the 3rd application for Community Garden Phase 2. Those 60 senior units would be constructed on the balance of the former community hospital site, as well as a fair portion of the former Schaefer Middle School site. Sometimes even good projects have to just wait their turn. You know, as a city commission, that the Ohio Housing Finance Agency has looked favorably upon Springfield for many years. And so every once in a while, they have to distribute funds to other places in the state. NHP has been very determined and very focused to continue the build out of this project. And so each year they put it back in for consideration. We hope that this is their year. That is a good project. It will serve, as I said, seniors within our community. The one significant difference to understand is that these 60 units will be 1-bedroom units. That is a decision that has been made out of necessity, specifically pertaining to the way that Section 8 housing choice vouchers can be applied. Most seniors live individually. So if a senior also is eligible and qualified for a housing choice voucher, they can only use that voucher in a one-bedroom apartment. So this development speaks to the changing compliance and regulatory policies that are necessary to continue good housing within the community. The Interfaith Housing Network, because it's the development arm of Interfaith Hospitality Network, in partnership with RLH Development, is 231-20. This is a proposal for 40 units of what we call permanent supportive housing. In general terms, what that means is this is housing for some of those who are hardest to house. These would be individuals that have been chronically homeless, have had other situations that preclude them or prevent them from being a part of public housing. That could be a record of evictions. It could be a record of addiction. IHN as a coordinated group of service providers is very well equipped to provide permanent supportive housing. They developed Mulberry Terrace a number of years ago, which is also permanent supportive. And overall, that development has been a phenomenal asset and success within the community. Mulberry Springs is proposed to follow that exact same model. There will be a multifamily development at the former, well, it's still current, but it would be former Woodford apartment complex on Yellow Spring Street. And then in addition, they would build 10 other units in 5 separate duplexes on Mulberry Street and Southern Avenue. Both Mulberry and Southern are areas that IHN has already invested and has ongoing work. And so overall, city staff is very supportive of both of these projects as they fit very well within our housing plans. We know too well that permanent supportive housing is of the utmost importance at this point in time, especially during COVID. CGAB did hear both of these projects in October and made the recommendation to move forward. And so this is just that last step of city support necessary for them to make their applications in February.
Thank you, Shannon.
Any further questions? Clerk will proceed with second readings.
Amending the zoning map of Springfield, Ohio by rezoning 0.57 acre at 223 Montgomery Avenue, Springfield, Ohio, from RS5 Low Density Single Family Residence District and CC2 Community Commercial District to CI1 Intensive Commercial District.
So moved, Destro.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill,
yes,
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland,
Yes.
vacating the first alley north of East High Street from Fostoria Avenue east to the intersecting north-south alley.
So
Move to
moved.
adopt. Second.
Any questions? Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
yes,
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland,
Yes.
amending ordinance number 9190 passed March 12, 1991 and commonly known as the codified ordinances of the city of Springfield, Ohio by the amendment of sections 911.16 and 915.02 thereof relative to utility connection fees on unassessed property and repealing existing sections 911.16 and 915.02.
move to adopt,
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments?
Yes. Can staff talk about what the changes are for the utility connection fees on this ordinance, please?
Yes, Commissioner, I'd be happy to. These are the connection fees for connecting both on the water and the sewer side, and previously to connect For a 5/8 inch meter, it was $200.90. This is going to, we're proposing that this increases to $215. So that would be a $14.10 increase. On the sewer side of things, we're proposing a decrease here from $1,090.99 to $625.
So it's a significant cut overall.
Yes.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
It's good for developers. It will enhance some subdivisions. I know there's one going down that nobody has mentioned over on Northern Avenue that used to be owned by a church. It looks like it's going to have about 20 units. So there's a lot of development going on by independent contractors.
Anybody else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland,
Yes.
authorizing the city manager to apply for and accept, if awarded, Fund Year 2020 Ohio Law Enforcement Body Armor Program Grant in an amount up to $7,578 from the Ohio Attorney General's Office, and authorizing the city manager, finance director, law director, and chief of police to perform all acts and execute all documents they consider necessary to fulfill the city's obligations under said grant and to comply with all relevant local, state, and federal legal requirements.
Move to adopt.
Second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Clerk will call the roll.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland,
Yes.
authorizing the law director to approve and settle a claim with Brian S. McGee for the expense incurred as a result of damage that occurred on his property located at 260 West Harding Road on or about August 10th, 2020, and authorizing the director of finance to make payment to Brian S. McGee in the amount of $800 as full settlement as and for said damage.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from commission? Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland,
Yes.
city manager to enter into amendment number 1 to the subrecipient funding agreement with the Clark County Combined Health District to extend the period of performance to December 31, 2021.
So moved.
To adopt.
It's been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission?
Yes. Could our staff talk about what this is? Because I would like for our citizens to understand that the city of Springfield is supporting the testing and everything that's going on now for the COVID-19.
Yes, Commissioner. So this is a agreement that we entered in fairly early. Shannon and her team worked with the health department and Charlie Patterson to set up funds that would be available to assist in the testing of low mod income individuals throughout our community, and set up these testing sites for that exact purpose. That grant was set to expire, that agreement was set to expire at the end of this calendar year, and we felt it was appropriate. There is still money remaining and available for help and assistance in those testing services. And so it is our recommendation to the commission that we extend this through the end of 2021 because we know even as the vaccine starts to come out, a key component to stopping the spread of the virus will continue to be testing in our community. And so the health department just held another testing event this past weekend at the fairgrounds. And so we believe testing will continue to be a tool and an asset to our community as we continue to fight the spread of COVID.
Thank you. Now I have another question on this one. If you've already been tested, let's say a couple of months ago, can you go back through one of these testings that the health department have and get retested?
Yes, you can go back and utilize their testing services again.
Thank you.
Could have been exposed in the meantime. We never know for sure, do we? Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland,
Yes.
authorizing the payment of up to $74,000 to the Board of County Commissioners of Clark County, Ohio, to obtain planning services from Clark County Springfield Transportation Coordinating Committee for the 2021 calendar year.
So moved, Estra.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
Confirming and approving the acceptance of the 2020 Burn Justice Assistance Grant Program Award through the U.S. Department of Justice to provide funding in the amount of $32,399 for purchase of various safety technology equipment and declaring an emergency therein.
So moved, Estra.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Questions or comments? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
Confirming and approving change order number 1 to the contract between the city and Milcon Concrete Incorporated for the West Main Street Sewer Project to increase the contract in an amount not to exceed $102,566.32 for a total amount not to exceed $441,411.32, and authorizing the city manager to execute said change order number 1 and declaring an emergency therein.
So moved, Estra.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments?
Yes. I was wondering if staff could explain what's prompted the need for this change order.
Yes, Commissioners, this change order is due nearly 100% to the amount of rock that was encountered on the project. As prior to the project, core samples were taken to find the depth of the rock, and there was still more rock than anticipated. So when you have more rock, the trench gets bigger, so the trench restoration cost goes up, and that is how we ended up with the change order we have before us right now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mhm.
Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
Confirming and approving change order number 1 to the contract between the city and Shelley Company for the 2020 paving ad for Gateway Boulevard to decrease the contract in an amount not to exceed $110,650.77 for a total amount not to exceed $359,249.63, and authorizing the city manager to execute said change order number 1 and declaring an emergency therein.
Move to adopt.
Second, Estra.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments?
Yes. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
No, I was just going to ask Joyce. Look, a decrease. We don't see that very often. And how did we get so lucky?
That was my question too.
So this was a case where the pavement appeared to be in very bad shape, and the problems we saw on the surface were believed to extend very deep. Once the surface was shaved off as part of the shave and pave, we anticipated doing full depth base repair. We did not have to do the full depth base repair. Once we shaved off the top layer, things were good and solid. So we were able to not perform a significant amount of work and save a nice bit of money on this one.
Well done. I love it. Thank you very much.
Win some, lose some. Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
The next 3 items were added to the agenda. Consenting to the reappointment of Blantus Mitchell and David Cotto to the Human Relations Board.
Move
So
to
moved.
adopt.
For those of you who aren't clear, that's Winky Mitchell. Anybody else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
Consenting to the appointment of Margaret Foley to the City Planning Board.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Clerk will call the roll.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
Consenting to the reappointment of James R. Smith to the City Planning Board.
Move to adopt.
Well, second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes. That concludes our agenda. Are there other items that come before us from commissioners?
Yes.
Yes, Dave?
I would just again, Mayor Copeland, like to ask Mr. Heck if he would give us a summary of how we're doing relative to city services and COVID. Also talk a bit about development on the south side, particularly Kroger, and then ask Mr. Bechtel for a finance report, an update based on COVID.
Yes, definitely, Commissioner. So on the first item, we are faring better than we were 2 weeks ago, but we still have more cases than what we have had throughout this entire pandemic over the last month, I'd say. And so it's still something that we're continually watching and the impact and effect it has on our operations and services. Fortunately, has not had any major hindrance. With the largest hit right now is really on the police side, where we have many members impacted either due to exposure or positive, but we're able to continue our normal operations and services. As you know, we did make the decision to shut down city buildings again to the public, and that will continue through the end of this year. We're continually evaluating and kind of seeing how the numbers are going in our community. As you know, we remain at red, whereas some other counties across the state of Ohio have moved to purple. I think it's the most number of purple counties or level 4 counties that they've had throughout this pandemic and since the public health advisory system went into place. So we're just continuing to track and monitor and make the right decision for our employees as well as the general public. We do not want to unnecessarily expose anyone. Again, probably the most frequented section of our buildings is the utility billing and income tax areas, specifically right now more the utility billing. There are other options for members to pay their utility bills or ask questions. One, if they're seeking other forms of payment, we do have online services. So you can go to our website at www.springfieldohio.gov. And our utility billing section will allow you to make those online payments. There's also drop boxes, one on Fountain Avenue by City Hall at 76 East High Street, and then also one out at the Service Center, 2100 Lagunda Avenue. So there's an opportunity individuals can drop those in there as well. And as always, our staff is continuing to work inside the buildings. And so if there are questions, the public can feel free to reach out and give us a call. Any of the departments that they would normally work with, please give us a call. We are still here, still working. Some are sometimes splitting time and doing some remote work, but our new phone system allows us to forward our phones. And so those phones are forwarded when they're not actually sitting right at their desk. So there's plenty of opportunity for people to still connect with us and move about normal operations and business for themselves as well. As far as South Limestone project, we are working on a redevelopment agreement with the developer, Larry Dillon, the Dillon Company. We just sent that off to him yesterday and going back and forth and hope to bring something in front of the commission very soon. So we continue to work with him and progress in the development of the business plan and pro forma for that project, specifically at the Kroger site there on South Limestone. As you know, we did tear down the former antique or auction house that was there. And that property has been raised and completely down and backfilled and seeded and mulched. So we have that property secure as part of the overall development. We are moving forward with the South Limestone Corridor, the transportation network. You may have seen the information in the paper yesterday. Well done by Chris Moore in talking to the paper about the project, but we're currently in the public involvement open house stage. And of course, with COVID-19, everything's a little bit different. So it's an online open house. And so again, if you go to our website at springfieldohio.gov, there's a link on the homepage that will take you to all the information about the project. There's a nice little video that was conducted by our consultant, LJB. And there's also a form that individuals can fill out and return to us so that we can have comments and feedback and input on the project itself. And also, if any individual, business, or so forth wants to talk about the project, they're certainly welcome to give us a call here. They can reach out to my office at 324-7300 to talk about the project, or Chris Moore at 525-5800. But we're excited for that project to get going. Again, phase 1 has been funded by Ohio Department of Transportation through their safety program. And we should really hear any day now on phase 2 of the project, which we're also seeking safety funds for. I would think no later than the end of the year, we would know if we are successful in receiving that funding. So that is my updates.
Okay.
Mark, if you want to talk on the financial end.
Before Mark talks, Brian, one other question.
Yes.
What's the status of payment at the parking deck? I know we extended it initially to the end of to December 31, 2020. But I think that may have been extended beyond that. Am I correct?
Yes, that is correct, Commissioner. We made the decision. We obviously worked with Commission and talked with Commission about it, but internally with staff as well. And we've made the decision to make the parking garage free for all of 2021 in recognition that COVID is still here. COVID is still impacting our community. It's impacting our small business. It's impacting our workers that come to downtown. 65% of the workers at the office complexes in downtown are still working remotely. And so we just thought it was the right decision to make that decision for 2021, to keep that free, to do our part in trying to help those small businesses, trying to help our businesses that locate in our downtown and those that come and frequent our downtown.
Great. Thank you very much.
As some of you may know, we held a press conference to talk about homelessness in Springfield. Is Shannon still on?
Yes, she is.
Shannon, could you talk about anything to follow up on that?
I sure can. So over the last 2 weeks, there has been a lot of work and a lot of effort among federal, state, and local governments and all of the state and local partners and agencies that would be associated with homelessness and homelessness response. I have to say that the outpouring of support and desire to truly learn about what is happening in Springfield as it pertains to the growth in the number that have been displaced from homes has been uplifting in many respects. Unfortunately, even with all of the support that we have and all of the work and efforts that are going into helping our community align with even more response to homelessness, our unsheltered wait list continues to grow. As of the end of last week, we reached the new unprecedented number of 243 individuals on the shelter waiting list, with 146 individuals in shelter. So today that means that we have 389 individuals who have, for one reason or another, been displaced from their homes during this time period. I will say that the state of Ohio has been phenomenally responsive and supportive. Along with Elena Bradley from Interfaith Hospitality Network and the Clark County Community Development Department, we have worked very well and diligently, I have to say, with multiple state agencies led specifically by Development Services Agency in identifying additional funding that may assist us in looking to the long-term and intermediate term of housing for those who are unsheltered and displaced, but then also the immediate term. I have spoken for months, and so has Elena, about the fact that there just are no more rooms at the inn, in that we just couldn't bring any more hotels online in the private market to assist with this displacement. The state, as well as the county community development department, have really gone all in with us in helping to identify corporate partners that may own the local franchisers, so that we can get as many displaced, unsheltered families into housing as soon as possible. We cannot get our new shelter or our 2 existing shelters online fast enough at this point in time. And even when they come online, we are still going to need, as a community, to have these additional hotels procured. So right now we are seriously working on trying to negotiate leases for 100% occupancy of entire hotels. These costs are eligible under our emergency solutions grants. I spent over 2 hours this morning with Senator Brown's staff talking about projections of needs into the future as they look at additional funding support, not only for the city of Springfield, but for the state of Ohio and the entire country. What we're experiencing is bad. It's unprecedented, it's historic. We can point to a number of subjective variables that are adding to it. But what we know is that the city of Springfield is experiencing something ahead of what the rest of the state of Ohio is about to experience. So one of the commitments our team has made to the state agencies is everything we figure out, everything we do, we are documenting, so that our lessons learned, our valuable partnerships, and anything that we may have creatively pulled out of thin air and worked, we will be sharing with the rest of the state of Ohio. As the CDC moratorium on evictions is set to expire on December 31st, the entire state, as well as nation, is bracing for a huge avalanche of displaced families, because the eviction moratorium just provided a stay and did not forgive, right, the back rent that would be due. You know, the partnerships, the commitments, the dedication and determination of this community. We've talked about that stubborn grit and adversity before. It is on display 24 hours a day, 7 days a week right now. There are no easy answers, but no one is giving up.
So does it remain true that about half of these folks are kids?
More than half of the individual count are children. About 70% of the people who are currently being housed in the hotels are children. This is definitely a flip. Well, there's so many things that are different from the norm, but there's a flip that really started to take place in September and built into a new norm, where historically we would see most people who are served through emergency shelter were single individuals. At this point, the norm is the family, and within that, the working family continues to grow.
Shannon, could
Yes,
you
sir.
repeat the current numbers again, please?
Sure. So these numbers were updated for me on Thursday evening. So Dave, it is possible before today I will open an email with even different numbers.
Okay,
But as of Thursday evening, we have 243 individuals on the shelter waiting list.
okay,
That is in addition to 146 individuals who are currently in non-congregate hotel shelter.
okay.
Adding those together, you have 389 individuals in need.
Thank you very much.
Yes. I might just give a comparison there very quickly, just because I did this with Senator Brown earlier this morning. If you take that 389 and divide it by the traditional year in December, we are looking at a 657% increase in services and needs at this point in time. I'll remind everybody, IHN has 9 staff members. So this really is an all-in community effort. This is what community is all about at this point.
Thank you for all that you're doing
It's a blessing and an honor, sir. Thank you.
and for all that your people are doing.
Absolutely.
I know Brown's people are trying to do something because the local one called me when he saw in the paper that there was a hotel opening up. Trouble is, it was not here, it was in Urbana. So I had to straighten him out a little bit, but Brown's people are trying to help, the state is trying to help, but the need is big.
Yep. Yep.
Anything else to come before us?
I'd like to hear the finance report from Mark, if I could.
Well, Commissioner, I'll be brief. I get to sound like a broken record here because we seem to still be holding pretty steady. As of the end of November, our income tax receipts pulled back within 1% of what they were in 2019. So we feel very fortunate from that standpoint. We are running a surplus in the general fund at this point in time, although we do have a number of transfers that will happen in the month of December, so that may change. But at this point, we're in pretty good shape.
Very good. Thank you. Keep up the good work, everyone. Feel very fortunate.
Anyone else? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Esther.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.